The alien queen wed a human for peace, but when war came, he fought like a god. The first shot hit the diplomatic shuttle before the landing gear even touched the platform. Cole Hargrove felt the blast rattle through the hull like a hammer strike on a tin can. He was already unbuckling before the second shot came, moving on reflex, 14 years of Army Ranger muscle memory taking over before his brain caught up. The other human delegates were screaming. The Vahari honor guard, tall, forearmed, their amber eyes wide, stood frozen. Nobody in this room had trained for this. Not today. Not on what was supposed to be the day the war finally ended. Cole was not nobody. He pulled the Vahari guard closest to him behind the reinforced bulkhead and pointed at the emergency seal panel. "Lock it now." His voice did not shake. It never shook when things got bad. Only when things got quiet. The guard stared at him. These creatures were a full head taller than him. Their torsos wrapped in ceremonial armor that could stop a pulse round, but they were standing there like statues. "Lock it," Cole said again, and something in his tone moved them. Metal groaned. The shuttle tilted hard to the left. Someone behind him hit the floor. Cole grabbed the nearest handhold, scanned the interior in 3 seconds flat. 6 humans, 4 Vahari, 1 hull breach forming in the rear left panel, smoke already threading through the gap. He was not supposed to be the ranking soldier here. He was the cultural liaison. He had spent the last 2 years learning to speak broken Vahari, eating their food without making a face, sitting cross on the stone floors of their council chambers for hours at a time, listening. His job was to be the human who did not embarrass humanity. The actual soldiers were supposed to be outside on the escort ships. The escort ships were not answering their comms. Cole moved to the rear panel, pulled a fire suppression canister off the wall mount, and sealed the breach the old-fashioned way. Foam, pressure, and a piece of hull plating he tore free with his bare hands and held in place until the emergency adhesive took. His palms burned. He did not stop. "What is your name?" The voice came from behind him. A quiet, steady. He turned. She was standing in the center of the shuttle, untouched by the chaos, watching him. He had seen her image in files. He had read the briefings. But files did not capture the way Queen Sarah Vaughn of the Vahari sovereignty held a room. She was tall even by Vahari standards, her secondary arms folded at her sides in the posture that their culture used to signal authority, her primary arms loose and open, which, he had learned, meant she was not afraid. Her eyes were the deep gold of old coins, and they were fixed entirely on him. "Cole Hargrove," he said, "Cultural Liaison, Earth Diplomatic Corps. You sealed the breach." "Yes. Our engineers could not locate the suppression kit in time. I know where they put those kits. I checked when we boarded. I check every vehicle I ride in." She looked at him for a moment that stretched longer than the situation probably warranted. Around them, the shuttle continued to groan, and the sounds of weapons fire outside were getting closer. "The peace agreement," she said. "The ceremony is meant to take place in 1 hour." "Your Majesty," Cole said carefully, "I think someone does not want that ceremony to happen." She tilted her head slightly. It was a Vahari gesture he had come to recognize as agreement delivered with reluctance. "Yes, that is the correct assessment." She paused. "Can you get us to the ground assembly hall?" He looked at the breach he had just sealed. He looked at the 4 Vahari guards who were finally starting to move like soldiers again. He looked at the 6 human delegates who were pale-faced and shaking but alive. He looked back at her. "I can get you there," he said. She studied him another moment. "The Vahari honor guard will take point." "With respect, Your Majesty, they don't know this kind of fighting. I've seen it in their stance and their response time. Whatever hit this shuttle, they weren't trained for it." A long pause. The shuttle shuddered again. "Then you will take point," she said. It was not a question. Cole nodded once and moved to the door. He did not know in that moment what the next 6 hours would cost him. He did not know that the faction trying to stop this peace was larger, better armed, and more desperate than any intelligence report had suggested. He did not know that by the end of the day, his name would be spoken in Vahari council chambers, in a tone reserved for their warrior saints. He only knew the door, the smoke beyond it, and the job. He kicked the door open and went through first. The ground level of the Vahari capital city of Shoravel was a maze of stone corridors and open ceremonial plazas connected by elevated walkways. Under normal circumstances, it was one of the most beautiful places Cole had ever stood. A city built vertically over thousands of years. Every surface carved with the history of a civilization that had been reaching for the stars before humans had figured out the wheel. Under current circumstances, it was a kill zone. They moved fast. Cole kept the Queen and the delegates in the center. The 4 Vahari guards spread in a diamond around them, and himself at the front where he could see what was coming first. He had one weapon, a standard-issue sidearm he was technically not supposed to carry to a diplomatic ceremony, tucked into the back of his waistband under his jacket, because 14 years of ranger service had made technically not supposed to feel like a personal challenge. He had 8 rounds. They made it 200 meters before the first ambush hit. The shooter was positioned on the 3rd-level walkway above the northern plaza. Cole saw the shadow shift before the trigger was pulled. A small thing, the shadow, a half-second warning, and he was already moving, pushing the nearest delegate sideways, calling out positions to the guards in Vahari before the first shot even landed. The bolt hit the stone where the delegate had been standing. Dust and chips of ancient carved rock sprayed across the plaza. Cole did not return fire yet, he counted. 1 shooter above north. The angle of the shot told him the second shooter would be south and low, trying to drive them toward the north where the first one waited. Classic funnel. He had set up this exact trap himself, in a different star system, a different war, in a life that felt like someone else's now. He turned to the senior Vahari guard, a broad-shouldered warrior named Keth, who had been eyeing him with something between suspicion and professional curiosity since they left the shuttle. South wall, low angle, second shooter. He's waiting for us to move north. When I draw the first one's attention, you take your 2 fastest guards and flank south. Don't engage until you hear my 3rd shot. Keth stared at him. How do you know there is a second shooter? Because I know how ambushes work. A beat. Another shot from above, closer this time, hitting the pillar 6 feet to their left. South wall, Keth said, and moved. Cole stepped out from cover, not far, not stupidly. He stepped into a partial sight line and moved laterally, fast, giving the shooter on the north walkway a moving target that was just close enough to tempting. The shooter took the bait. 3 shots, none close, each one giving Cole a fractional better fix on the position. He waited for a reload gap. It came at exactly the moment he expected, which told him the shooter was nervous and rushing, and then he fired twice upward, not trying to hit, just trying to create movement. The shooter ducked behind a stone pillar. Cole fired his 3rd shot into the air. From the south, he heard Keth's guards engage. The second shooter had exactly 3 seconds of surprised hesitation before they were on him. It was enough. Cole moved back to the group. His hands were steady. His chest was hammering. Queen Sarah Vaughn was watching him again. You used yourself as a target, she said. Controlled risk. You were not afraid. He almost laughed. I was very afraid. I just needed to be afraid in a useful direction. She was quiet for a moment. Around them, Keth's guards were securing the south position, calling clear in Vahari. The threat was down for now, but Cole could hear more movement in the corridors to the east. Whoever was running this operation had numbers. They had planned for the peace ceremony to fail, and they had planned well. He did a quick count in his head. 6 human delegates, 1 queen, 4 guards, 2 of whom were now tied up with prisoners in the south corridor, 8 rounds down to 6. 2 kilometers to the assembly hall through a sea that had turned hostile. We need to move, he said. The assembly hall is guarded, she told him. My council has loyalists there. How many hostiles between here and there? I do not know. Then we find out on the way. He turned to the group. Stay tight, stay low, follow my pace. If I say down, you go down without asking why. If I say run, you run and don't stop until I tell you to. The human delegates looked at him like he had become a different person. Maybe he had. Cole spent 2 years becoming the version of himself that sat in stone rooms and ate strange food and learned an alien language with patience and good humor. That version was still in there. It was just standing behind the version that had come home. He took point again. They moved into the eastern corridor. The next 40 minutes were the longest of Cole Hargrove's life. And he had once spent 9 hours pinned behind a collapsed wall, in a place that no longer appeared on any official map, with 3 broken ribs and a field-dressed wound in his left shoulder. The eastern corridor gave them 2 more contacts. Cole took one down with precise fire, 4 rounds now, and Keth, who had rejoined them and seemed to have permanently revised his opinion of humans, handled the second with the kind of smooth and terrifying Vahari close-quarters technique that Cole made a private note to ask about later, when nobody was trying to kill them. They came out into the lower plaza 200 meters from the assembly hall, with the sun dropping toward the horizon and the air smelling of scorched stone and something floral that Cole could not identify. The assembly hall doors were open. Light poured out of them. Figures stood at the entrance. Vahari in council robes, humans in diplomatic gray, And when they saw the queen walking out of the smoke, there was a sound from inside that Cole had no word for in any language he spoke. Queen Saravan walked through the doors of her assembly hall like she had simply gone for a walk and come back. Her robes were torn at the left primary shoulder. Her expression was composed. She turned in the doorway and looked back at Cole, who had stopped at the threshold. "You are not coming in?" she asked. "My job was to get you here. Your job," she said carefully, "may have expanded." He looked at her. She looked at him. Around them, the council chamber was erupting in questions and noise. And outside the city of Shoravel was beginning to realize that something had gone very wrong with the planned assassination of its queen and the sabotage of the peace it desperately needed. Cole stepped through the door. He was still carrying 4 rounds and a very strong feeling that the day was not over. He was right. The assembly hall was built for ceremony, not defense. And Cole saw that problem immediately. 3 entry points on the main floor, 2 balcony levels with open sightlines, a vaulted ceiling that would channel sound, and concussive blast, straight down to the floor. The Vahari who designed this room had been thinking about acoustics and grandeur, not about what happens when the people who want the queen dead realize she made it to the hall alive. He walked the perimeter while the council erupted around him. Vahari voices were sharp and high when they were agitated, a sound like struck glass. And right now the hall sounded like an orchestra pit warming up. The human delegates had found the Vahari embassy staff and were being assessed for injuries. Keth had pulled his 2 remaining guards to the main door and locked it, which was smart but not enough. "You are looking at the windows," Queen Saravan said from behind him. He did not jump. He turned. She had followed him to the edge of the hall. 3 on the east face, 2 on the west, he said. The east ones are the problem. Lower elevation, closer to the street grid. If the people running this operation have any tactical sense, they already have eyes on this building. "They have tactical sense," she said quietly. "This faction has been planning for months. They do not want peace with Earth. They believe that an alliance with your species will end Vahari independence. Will it?" The question surprised her. He could tell because her secondary arms moved, a small involuntary gesture like a human's eyebrows going up. "No," she said, "but fear does not require accurate information. Only sufficient emotion." Cole turned back to the east windows. "Who is leading them?" "A general. His name is Devon Reth. He commanded our eastern fleet during the border conflicts. He is respected and he is wrong, and he has enough loyal soldiers to make this very difficult." "How many?" "Estimates ranged from 200 to 400 before today." She paused. "Today's operation was sophisticated. I would revise upward." Cole blew out a slow breath. 4 rounds. A building with 3 open entries. A queen who was the entire political center of a peace agreement that had taken 2 years of humanity's diplomatic resources to negotiate. "Why did you agree to the marriage clause?" he asked. It came out before he fully decided to say it. The marriage clause had been the strangest part of the peace framework. A symbolic bonding between a human representative and the Vahari queen. Not a legal marriage by Earth standards, more of a Vahari tradition called the Sharffeth. A bonding of purpose between leaders of allied peoples. The Vahari diplomatic team had insisted on it as a cultural anchor for the treaty. Earth had agreed because refusing had felt rude. Cole had been nominated because he was the only human in the delegation who could speak Vahari without making the council wince. He had not asked her, until now, whether she had chosen it or accepted it. "The Sharf is not ceremonial decoration," she said. "It is the oldest form of binding commitment in our culture. When I agreed to it, I was saying that I staked my personal honor on the permanence of this peace, not the honor of the state. Mine." She looked at him with those gold eyes. "I chose it because I believed the human I bonded with would be someone worth staking honor on. You didn't know me before today. I read your service record, your diplomatic assessment file. 3 years of reports from cultural liaison teams you worked with. A pause that had weight in it. You stopped twice in the middle of active combat situations to ensure your translators were physically safe before proceeding." Cole said nothing. "I found that interesting," she said. The east window exploded inward. Cole was already moving. Had heard the shift of air a half-second before the impact. That old animal awareness that had kept him alive in a dozen places he did not talk about at dinner parties. He hit Sarah from the left, carrying them both behind one of the massive carved stone pillars that lined the hall's interior. The blast hit the floor where she had been standing. Smoke, screaming, the high glass sound of Vahari voices in full alarm. Cole came up from behind the pillar, scanned fast. Breach at the east window, 2 figures moving through the smoke. He fired twice, one shot each, controlled and deliberate. Both threats went down, 2 rounds left. He turned to Sarah. She was upright, steady, her expression tight but not shattered. "Are you injured?" "No." She looked at his hands. "You are." He glanced down. Right palm, glass from the window, a cut that was bleeding freely. He had not noticed. He wrapped it against his jacket and moved on. Keth was across the hall, already coordinating a counter-push at the main door, which had begun to shudder with impacts from outside. The human delegates were behind the council table, low and out of sight lines. The Vihari council members, older, robed, completely untrained for this, had managed to activate some kind of internal alarm, and Cole could hear the deep resonant tone of it hammering through the walls. "Loyalist reinforcements," Sarah said. "The alarm calls them. 12 minutes, perhaps. A lot can happen in 12 minutes. Yes." The main door gave. Not all at once. It buckled at the upper left corner first, then the hinges tore with a sound like breaking bones, and the door came down flat onto the floor of the assembly hall, and through the smoke and light beyond it walked soldiers in Vihari, tactical gear, their weapons raised. General Dovan Reth's command insignia on their chest plates. There were 9 of them. Cole had 2 rounds. He stepped out from the pillar. Not to fight, not yet. He stepped out because he had seen in 20 seconds of observation what the tactical situation actually was. The 9 soldiers were spread too wide for their formation, covering too much space with too few people, which meant they were a vanguard, and their confidence was coming from numbers they thought were coming behind them. Bluff confidence, the kind that cracked under pressure if you hit it right. "Stand down," he said, in Vihari, clearly, loudly. 9 weapons swung to him. "You are human," said the soldier in front. The word human carried a weight of contempt that needed no translation. "Correct," Cole said. "I'm the Sharth, bonded of your queen, standing in the middle of your operation, with 2 rounds in the full awareness that if you fire in this hall you will hit your own queen at least once before I'm down." He kept his voice level. Conversational, the way he had learned to talk in the valley between trigger and outcome. "So I am asking you to think about what you came here to protect." Silence. 9 soldiers. None of them were firing. That meant he was right about the bluff. These were soldiers, not fanatics, and soldiers thought about the calculus of a thing. "Dovan Reth sent you here to stop the peace," Cole said. "But the Queen is alive, the delegates are alive, and the Loyalist response is 4 minutes out. Not 12. I've been counting the alarm cycle. This operation has already failed. What happens next depends on whether you decide to be part of a failed coup or part of a peace that keeps your people from fighting a war they cannot win." The lead soldier stared at him. Keth moved up quietly to Cole's left. He had recovered a weapon from one of the downed soldiers. He said nothing. He simply stood there, big and scarred and fully present, which said more than words. Behind Cole, Queen Sarah Vaughn stepped into view. She did not say anything either. She did not have to. She was the queen. The lead soldier's weapon lowered 1 centimeter, then another. Then it went down, and one by one, in the long silence of a hall full of smoke and broken stone, and the echo of a war that had almost started again today, the other 8 followed. Cole exhaled. His hand hurt. His chest felt like a drum someone had been beating for the last hour. He became aware, distantly, that he had not eaten since morning. Sarah stepped up beside him and spoke quietly. 4 minutes. I know, you lied about the alarm cycle. It was approximately 4 minutes, yes. You did not know exactly. No. She was quiet a beat. That was a large risk. It was the only card I had left, he said. 2 rounds in the truth don't win that standoff. But 2 rounds in a confident lie about timing? Different math. She turned to look at him fully. In the fading afternoon light pouring through the ruined east window, with smoke still moving through the air, and the sound of the Loyalist response force, arriving at speed somewhere beyond the building, she looked at him the way she had looked at him in the shuttle, with an attention that felt like being read. "You are a very strange kind of diplomat," she said. "I'm a very strange kind of soldier, too. I am beginning to think," she said, "that this is precisely what the Sharth required." The Loyalists came through the north entrance 40 seconds later, flooding the hall, securing the soldiers who had stood down, filing around Cole and Sarah like water around 2 rocks. Keth gave his report in fast Vihari, gesturing twice at Cole with an expression that, if Cole was reading it right, constituted something close to professional admiration. Sarah did not move from where she was standing, neither did Cole. The peace ceremony, delayed by 2 hours and 17 minutes, took place that evening in a hall that smelled of smoke and had one Walmart window covered in emergency sheeting. Cole stood at the center of it with a bandaged hand and a jacket that had seen better days. and he spoke the words of the Sharft in careful, deliberate Vahari while the full council listened. And something that had been a political arrangement became, in the speaking of it, a thing with weight and meaning. Afterward, when the hall had cleared and the delegates had been taken to secure accommodations, and Keth had clapped Cole on the shoulder with enough force to knock him forward a step, which Cole understood was a Vahari compliment of the highest order. Sarah found him standing by the covered window, looking out at the city through the gap at the edge of the sheeting. "It is not over," she said. "Dovenreth was not here today. He sent his soldiers while he positioned himself elsewhere. He will not accept the treaty simply because today's operation failed. I know. He has ships, I know that too." She stood beside him. The city was dark and lit in patches, the tall vertical spires of Choravel glowing amber and blue against the night sky. It was, Cole thought, genuinely beautiful in the way that things you might lose always were. "The Sharft," she said carefully, "is not reversible. I read that part of the briefing. And you agreed anyway." "I agreed," he said, "because the alternative was the war continuing, and because your people are worth the effort of peace." She was quiet for a moment. "General Reth will come," she said. "Let him," Cole said. "I'll be here." She turned to look at him. He turned to look at her. Outside, Shora Vel hummed and glittered and breathed. "You should eat," she said. "You have not eaten since morning." Cole blinked. Then he laughed, the first real laugh he'd had all day, rising up from somewhere genuine. "Your Majesty," he said. "You've been paying attention." "It is my habit," she said, "to pay attention to things that matter." They ate dinner in the council antechamber with Kith standing at the door, and 3 Vahari dishes Cole had learned to enjoy over 2 years of patient practice. The city was quiet outside. Somewhere beyond the quiet, a general with a fleet was making plans. Cole ate. He rested his bandaged hand on the table. He listened to Sarah describe the history of the Sharft ceremony, how it had been used 3 times in Vahari history, and what each of those bondings had meant for the people involved. He thought about the east window, the 9 soldiers, the lie about the alarm cycle that had worked because it was delivered without flinching. He thought about what came next. Whatever Devon Reth was planning, he would not be planning for the version of Cole Hargrove that existed now. The version that had spent 2 years becoming fluent in the culture and politics and emotional landscape of this people, and who had also, today, remembered exactly what the other version of him was capable of. The general was going to find that combination very inconvenient. Cole finished his dinner and asked Keth if there was a tactical map of the Vahari Eastern Fleet positions available. Keth stared at him, then he pulled one up. 3 weeks passed before Dovenreth moved. They were not quiet weeks. Cole spent them learning everything there was to know about the general. His tactical history, his political alliances, the officers who served under him and the degree of their loyalty, the specific ships in his fleet, and their capabilities and weaknesses. He did this in the same way he had learned Vahari culture, systematically, patiently, with a note-taking discipline that made the young Vahari intelligence officers assigned to him visibly nervous about what he was going to do with the information. Sarah watched him work. She did not interfere. She contributed, when she had information he lacked, in the clean, efficient way of someone who had been governing a sovereign people since age 24 and did not confuse helpfulness with control. They fell into a rhythm, morning briefings together, separate afternoons. She had a civilization to run and he had strategies to build. Evenings that started as working dinners and gradually became something longer and more comfortable. A space where she asked him questions about Earth, and he asked her questions about Vahari history, and both of them, carefully and without announcement, began to learn each other the way you learn something you plan to keep. The Sharft, Cole was realizing, was not a political arrangement. It was an extremely old culture's extremely clear-eyed recognition that the people who bound a peace together needed to actually trust each other. Everything about the ceremony, the language, the timing, the way the council witnessed it, was designed to make that trust real rather than performed. He was not sure when it had become real. He was fairly sure it had happened sometime around the 3rd week, when she had walked into the war room at midnight, found him still working on fleet movement projections, set a cup of Vahari tea in front of him without a word, and gone to stand at the window looking out at the city with the expression she used when something was weighing on her. He had put down his work and asked her what was wrong, and she had told him, not as the queen, not in the careful diplomatic register she used in public, but in the honest, simple voice of a person who was tired and worried and needed to say the truth to someone she trusted. He had listened. He had not tried to fix it. He had said what he honestly thought. She had looked at him with those gold eyes and said, "You are the first person in 6 years who has spoken to me without calculating what I will think of the answer." Cole had not known what to say to that. So he had said, "I'll try to keep that up." She had almost smiled. Almost 3 weeks. Then the transmission came. Dovenreth's face appeared on every communication channel in Shoravel simultaneously. A broadcast hack that demonstrated both technical sophistication and the desire to be heard. He was an older Vahari, heavyset by their standards, his forearms arranged in the posture of formal authority. His face was the face of a man who believed entirely in what he was doing, which Cole had learned was the most dangerous kind of face there was. He spoke for 4 minutes. Cole watched with Sarah beside him and Keth behind them, and 6 senior council members around the table. The message was clear. The treaty was an act of surrender. The human alliance would consume Vahari sovereignty the way a tide consumed sand. The Sharft was a debasement of their oldest tradition, used to bind their queen to a species that would eventually dominate them. Any Vahari who valued their independence should refuse to accept it, and he was coming to ensure that refusal. He had brought his fleet, 240 vessels, to the edge of the Vahari home system. He was giving the council 72 hours to dissolve the treaty and renounce the Sharvith. If they refused, he would take the capital by force. When the transmission ended, the council chamber was very quiet. Then everyone started talking at once. Cole did not talk. He looked at the star map where Reth's fleet position had appeared as a red cluster at the system edge. And he thought about the defensive disposition of the loyalist Vahari fleet. 160 ships, good crews, good technology, but outnumbered. And the ground forces available in Shoravel. And the specific tactical advantages and disadvantages of a system defense versus a forward engagement. He thought about 14 years of learning how humans fought. Humans were not the largest species in the known galaxy. They were not the strongest. Their technology was competitive, but not dominant. What humans had, what had let them survive and expand, and eventually build the kind of relationship that produced peace agreements and Sharft ceremonies, was a specific and deeply embedded refusal to accept the terms of a fight as they were presented. Give a human a larger enemy with better equipment in a superior position, and the human would spend 30 seconds accepting that reality and the next several hours figuring out how to make it irrelevant. Cole had 30 seconds. He turned to Sarah. "Do you want him stopped or do you want him beaten?" he said. She looked at him. "Explain the difference." "Stop means we hold the capital, defend the treaty, survive the assault. The political question stays open. His ships are still out there. His political faction is still active. This conversation happens again in a year or 5 years or 10. Beaten means he has no fleet, no political credibility, and no capacity to threaten this peace again. Ever." The council was listening now. Keth was listening. "Beaten," Sarah said. Cole nodded. "Then give me the fleet command codes and a direct line to your senior admiral. You are asking to command our fleet. I'm asking to advise your admiral in a way that is going to sound like command. She can override me at any time, but she needs to be willing to act on recommendations that are going to seem wrong until they work." Sarah held his gaze for a long 5 seconds. "Admiral Yenna is in the North Communications room," she said. "I will tell her to listen to you." Cole was already moving. He spent the next 8 hours in the communications room with Admiral Yenna Thoss, who was a brilliant defensive commander, supremely experienced in the kind of engagement she had spent her career preparing for, and who looked at Cole's initial strategy proposal with the expression of someone who has been told to drive off a cliff because there is a bridge at the bottom. Cole explained the bridge. She argued, he argued back. He showed her the math, not just the fleet positions but the command psychology, the way Reth's confidence in his numerical advantage would make him predictable. The specific choke points in the system approach that would make a larger fleet slower and less flexible than a smaller one if used correctly. She asked questions. Good ones, hard ones. He answered all of them. At hour 4, she stopped arguing and started modifying. By hour 6, they had a plan that neither of them had started with, built from her knowledge of Vahari fleet doctrine and his knowledge of unconventional engagement. And it was better than anything Cole had brought to the table alone. "You think like someone who was always outnumbered," she said at one point. "I was always outnumbered," he said. She looked at him with the particular expression that the Vahari used when they were reassessing something. "The briefings on humans described your military as disciplined and technically capable," she said. "They did not mention this." "What?" "The refusal to lose." Cole smiled. That part doesn't show up well in reports. Reth's fleet moved at hour 61 of the 72-hour window, 11 hours early, presumably because his intelligence had suggested that the Treaty Council was close to a vote. He came in fast and confident, his fleet in the aggressive forward wedge formation that had won him 3 engagements in the border conflicts. He was 40 minutes into the system approach when the trap closed. Not a dramatic trap, not a single brilliant ambush. A series of small, precise overlapping actions. 12 of Yenna's ships pulling Reth's attention to the far approach, while 8 others came from completely unexpected vectors using the gravity shadow of the system's outer moon. A technique that Cole had described from human fleet doctrine and Yenna had adapted in 3 hours of elegant Vahari tactical calculation. The first 3 ships Reth lost were his command relay vessels. He did not immediately understand why that was the priority. It seemed like a strange choice. Cole had planned on that. With the Chalet ships gone, Reth's fleet could not coordinate at the speed his formation required. 240 ships, suddenly, had the effective response time of 240 independent decisions. A fleet is not a number. A fleet is communication and coordination, and the shared certainty of a plan. Take away the communication and you do not have 240 ships. You have 240 separate problems, each one manageable. Yenna understood this by minute 12 of the engagement. She was a fast study. By minute 40, Reth's formation had broken. By minute 70, 12 of his vessels had moved to defensive positions, the signal that their captains were done fighting. By minute 90, Dova and Reth sent a communication requesting terms of engagement. Yenna looked at Cole. Terms, Cole said, air your call, you won this. We won this, she said carefully. The pronoun was deliberate, he heard it. The terms took 4 hours to negotiate. Reth was stripped of his fleet command. His political faction was given a formal process through which to present their concerns to the council. Not dismissed, not punished for the concerns themselves, but separated from the weaponized form they had taken. 3 of his senior officers faced tribunal. The ships and crews who had stood down were folded back into the Loyalist fleet with a careful set of conditions that Sarah helped design personally. Cole was in the communications room for all of it, mostly quiet, speaking when asked. When it was over, when Reth's fleet had turned around, and the system threat was lifted, and Yenna had shaken Colsey's hand with all 4 of hers. In the Vahari gesture of deep professional respect, Cole walked back through the long corridors of the government complex to the council antechamber, where he had left Sarah receiving status reports. She was standing at the window again. Same window, different night. She heard him come in and did not turn around immediately. When she did, her face had the tiredness of someone who had been holding something heavy for a long time and had just put it down. It is done, she said. It is done. She looked at him for a moment. You gave Yenna the credit. She earned it. She took a plan from someone she had no reason to trust and made it work. She told me, Sarah said, that in 30 years of fleet command, she had never worked with anyone who thought the way you do. Did she mean that as a compliment? She meant it as a fact. The compliment was implicit. Cole sat down in the chair he had been using for 3 weeks, the one that had gradually developed the right dents and angles, and let himself be tired for a moment. His hand had healed. The city below was lit up, Choravel going about its evening in the specific way that cities did when they had just avoided something catastrophic, louder than usual, slightly manic, deeply alive. Sarah sat down across from him. She folded her primary hands on the table and looked at him with the direct attention that had never made him uncomfortable, even though it probably should have. The Treaty Council votes tomorrow, she said. How will it go? Well, the events of the last 3 weeks have clarified the arguments considerably. A pause. There will be formal opposition. Some of it legitimate. That is healthy. Cole nodded. The Sharfith, she said, is permanent by our tradition. But tradition does not determine everything. If you wish to request a formal review. I don't, he said. She was quiet. I said the words and I meant them, he said. The same way I mean things when I say them to you. You told me I was the first person in 6 years who spoke without calculating the answer. I'm not planning to change that. The window behind her showed the spires of Choravel against the dark. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, On Earth, is there a word for the feeling of not knowing when someone became important to you, only knowing that they are? Cole thought about it. There probably is, he said. I can't think of it right now. We have a word, she said. It is Shalin. It means approximately the discovery that something has already happened. Cole held that for a moment. Shalin, he said. Yes. Outside, the city hummed. The vote was tomorrow. The fleet was at peace. The general was defeated. And in the antechamber of the council building in Choravel, with the stars visible through a window that had overlooked several weeks of the most consequential events either of them had ever lived through, two people sat across a table from each other and said nothing for a while. Because some things do not need to be announced. They had already happened. The treaty was ratified the following morning by a margin of 23-4. Cole stood in the gallery with Keth, who had appointed himself something between a bodyguard and an aide, and showed no signs of stopping. When the final vote was read and the hall erupted, Keth clapped Cole on the shoulder again. Same force, same meaning. Cole stumbled forward again. He was starting to think Keth did it on purpose. Below, Sarah received the result with the composed expression of a queen, and then she looked up at the gallery, and when she found Cole's face, she did something he had not seen her do in public before. She smiled. Not a small political smile, not a diplomatic expression calibrated for the room, just a real one. Cole thought about the shuttle, and the breach, and 8 rounds that had become 2, and the lie about the alarm cycle, and the plan that had seemed like driving off a cliff until Yenna saw the bridge. He thought about 3 weeks of morning briefings and working dinners and midnight tea. He thought about Shalan. The discovery that something has already happened. She is smiling at you, Keth said with enormous satisfaction. I know, Cole said. In 30 years of serving her, I have never seen her smile like that in the council hall. Keth. Yes, thank you. Keth made a sound that Cole had learned was a Vahari laugh. Thank me when the hard part is over. Cole looked down at the hall, at the council, at the peace that had almost not happened, built on a shuttle breach and 2 rounds and a conversation by a window, and a word for things that sneak up on you. What hard part, he said. Keth gestured broadly at the galaxy. Fair point, Cole thought. He was already planning for it.